major struggles. I mean, I had a lot of relapses. I had a ton of those 30, 60, 90-day medallions. And Jim, I felt like he was putting more into my recovery than I was in the beginning. Jim's the kind of fella that you could call at 2 o'clock in the morning if you were struggling. And I know that because I was that guy that called him at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I can honestly say I don't know if I would have stuck it out if it wasn't for Jim picking up that bone.
Amen.
And congratulations.
Well, my name is Jim. I'm a grateful believer in Christ. Before I start, I always like to take a moment of silence for the addict, alcoholic, whatever your hurt, habit, or hang-up is. Just take a moment of silence to open our minds and our hearts to allow the Holy Spirit of God into our hearts and our minds. So let's just take a moment of silence, please. All right. So again, my name is Jim. I am a drug addict, but it's not the only hurt, habit, or hang-up I do have. My major one. At the same time, when I quit doing drugs, I also quit smoking cigarettes. So I got 20 years of no smoking cigarettes. It was tough. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me growing up, a little bit how I got introduced to drugs, kind of what my downfall was, and then I like to spend a lot of time on my recovery, because I got a lot of recovery underneath my belt. I still don't have as much recovery as I used, because I used for over 25 years. I was born in Superior, Wisconsin. I had two amazing parents, a very Christian Catholic, grew up in a very Christian Catholic family. We were probably middle class people, lower middle class. We weren't rich by no means and stuff. Like I said, I had great parents, and I lived in Superior until I was 12, and then we moved to St. Cloud. And that's when I first tried alcohol, for the first time, big time. I think I was in 6th grade, and my folks were gone for the weekend, and my older brother and sister were kind of keeping an eye on us, and my older sister introduced me to Buckhorn beer. It's not like I hadn't had a sip of beer before. Mom and Dad would have if relatives were up or something, we like to play cards and stuff, and so they'd just sit around and have a few cocktails, and but my parents, I think I've seen my dad drunk once, and I think I've seen my mom a little tipsy a couple of times, in all the years. So it's not like I was around people that used heavily. We lived in St. Cloud for 2.5 years. Then we moved up here on the range. I was in 8th grade, and that's when my using took off. Right as soon as I got up here. I did not want to be up here. I didn't want to move out of St. Cloud. My dad got transferred. I did not like the range. When I moved up here in the 80s, it was very cliquey. If you weren't a ranger, you weren't, and I was into athletics and stuff like that, and if you didn't have the right last name and stuff like that, and so I stuck it out for a couple of years, and I was on the diving team. I went out for baseball one year, and it just wasn't for me. I just didn't get along with the coaches, so I started using. I was my sibling, my brother, and a neighbor kid introduced me to marijuana, because I'd been drinking before that. But I didn't really like alcohol a lot, because if I drink too much alcohol, I get sick. I still drank, but if I drank too much, I would definitely get sick. But I smoked marijuana for the first time, and I was like, oh, I like this. I get really messed up, and I don't get sick, And that was, I was on an escape, using drugs. Growing up, I was sexually abused for many years. It was a family member, not my immediate family, but Yeah, it was an uncle, and it went on for many years, and then there was a few other instances with other people that happened, you know, it really screwed me up, you know, and my drugs were my escape, and I used all through high school. I like to tell everybody I graduated from Hibbing High. After I graduated from high school, actually I was in my senior year. I'd gotten held back in kindergarten, so I was actually a year past what I should have been. I was going to be a half credit short from graduating, and they said, well, to graduate you're going to have to go next year for half a year for half a day. I'm like, oh, no way. I've been in school for 12 and a half years, over 12 and a half years, and I'm like, I went and took my GED, and I went into the Marine Corps, figuring I'll get away from Hibbing, I'll go into the Marine Corps. And I lasted 3 years, and because of this thing here that I couldn't keep closed, I ended up getting kicked out of the Marine Corps. I don't like to share that because I loved being in the Marine Corps. I love being in the military. I just couldn't keep my mouth shut. And my last incident was, well, it was called verbal assault, but that wasn't what it was. I assaulted one of my superiors, and he assaulted me first, so I figured, well, it was fair game, but that's not how it works. Yeah. But so I got kicked out. I moved back to Hibbing for a while. It was 1984, end of '84, and there was no jobs up here. You know, all the mines were, most of the mines were shut down. It was pretty tough times back then. So I decided that I had known people in St. Cloud when I lived there, so I moved on to St. Cloud, and my using really took off when I went down there. It was the hallucinogenics and the cocaine and the meth. I mean, we called it crank back then, but just all the other drugs and stuff, different pills and whatever I could pretty much get my hands onto. I met my son's mother down there. I had a child. I have a 35-year-old son today, who right now is sitting in Stillwater prison because unfortunately he suffers from the same disease that I do, and his mother, who when my son, shortly after my son turned 18, well, her death certificate says accidental overdose. I think it was a suicide. I think she just didn't want to live anymore, and she figured Jeremy was her youngest, and he was grown up now and an adult, and I think she committed suicide. So my son's mother has died from this disease. And I've gone to a lot of funerals in my recovery of people that just went out one more time. So we'll back up a little bit. So in 1991, I'm like, I gotta move away from St. Cloud. I'm gonna kill my son's mother. She was a very mean person, very physical person, was turning me into a mean and physical person, and I was like, if I don't leave, because I caught her in bed with another guy, and I put the guy that she was in bed with in the hospital. I ended up doing some jail time in St. Cloud several times, and I figured, a geographical change will be good for me because then I won't use so many drugs. Wrong answer. My addiction came with me, and I continued to use, for many years. I was in a couple of long relationships. I met this lady. I moved to Kitsville. That's where I met. I've known Josh since he was like 9 or 10 years old, and his brother Dan and Paul, and a lot of people from Kitsville and stuff like that. So in 01, I really screwed up. I did some things that I'm not proud of. I hurt some people that I was with, the lady I was with, I hurt her. And of course, I had to go through the court process and everything. And before that happened, though, I had to meet with this parole officer, and he said, you can't use anymore. You can't use drugs, you can't drink, you can't go into a place that, unless you're maybe getting some food, you can't go into a place that has alcohol. I'm thinking, oh, my life is over. Maybe my life is gonna suck. This is gonna suck. And you know, it's like and you know, I started going back to the Catholic Church with my mom and dad, and I was seeing a psychologist at the time. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a little bit, but I just want to get kind of through my use. And I had been clean for about 7 months. Like I said, I've been seeing a psychologist. And I walked into my probation officer's office one day and I said, I can't take this anymore. My girlfriend of 10 years is leaving me. You know, my life is shot. I mean, I got nothing. I got nothing to live for. I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to go out and use. And he said, well, you're facing some pretty hefty prison. He said, you've been doing pretty good so far. I still had to go through court yet. I'm still in the process of going through court. And I had gotten introduced to Narcotics Anonymous when I was in St. Cloud at the jail. And I had actually had one stint, had like 9 months clean. And it took a guy about 5 minutes to convince me to go get high one night, and I was back off the races again after being clean for 9 months. 6 of those months I was in jail, so I mean, jail time counts. I mean, don't get me wrong, because I could still get dope in the jail. But you know, I was just so. I had talked to him about me being, and he found me at my first NA meeting, and I went to my first NA meeting at St. James Episcopal Church on Thursday night, which is my home group, and I still go there on a regular basis. I'm very active in Narcotics Anonymous. Narcotics Anonymous has saved my life. And, you know, it led me here, you know, because, like I said, and then, you know, shortly after, a couple of years after I'd been clean, my mom and dad decided to move back down to St. Cloud. Now, I still have one brother up here, and me and him don't talk. I haven't talked to him in several years. And I'm okay with that. I mean, I've tried to make that work, and it doesn't, and so I mean, I'm okay with that. Not happy about it, but you know, I just keep on praying for him. So I go to my first Narcotics Anonymous meeting. My probation officer found that meeting for me, and you know, I'm going to tell you about my first meeting. I went there, and 3 or 4 people had relapsed that week. There was a lady there that was obviously extremely messed up, and she dropped her purse and out rolled a bag of weed and a pot pipe, and I'm thinking, man, I came here for help. These people are more screwed up than I am. In my arrogance, you know, this is my arrogance, you know, I'm arrogant now. And there's a gentleman there named Ted who came up to me and said, boy, you picked a bad first meeting to go to. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, you know. But what he said next stuck with me. He said, this is a really good group, Jim. Keep on coming back. Just keep coming back. And I did. The following Thursday I came back, and the following Thursday after that, I just kept on coming back. You know, and when I got clean back in 01, or this is about, you know, well, halfway through 01, there was only one Narcotics Anonymous meeting in Hibbing. And so I used to go to meetings in Virginia. I'd go down to, you know, I would go to the Alamo Club, you know, go to AA, just to find recovery, you know, to get recovery. And I had met a gentleman named Joey, and we're still friends today. He's got 38 years clean. And he, actually when I first met Joey, I couldn't stand him. We almost had a fist fight. And now he's probably one of my best friends. And I was kind of church shopping. I'd been going to the Catholic church after mom and dad had moved and stuff, but I didn't feel welcome anymore, because when I was walking with them, because they were very active in the church, you know, everybody would say, hello, hey Bob, hey Joanne, hey Jim, and after mom and dad left, it was like I'd walk by and be people, hello, I'm still here, you know, and I just didn't feel welcome. So I called Joey up one Saturday night, and I said, hey, you want to go to church with me tomorrow? He's like, what church you go to? I said, I go to the Catholic church. And he goes, nah, I ain't gonna go to no Catholic church. He said, look, let's go to this other church that I go to once in a while. It was this place here. And I walked in, and the first thing that got me was the music. I love music. I'm actually I'll touch on it a little bit more, but I actually own my own DJ business now. And so I really love, I've always loved music, and like the music was very powerful, you know. And there's a gentleman that got up and preached that Sunday, and I was just like blown away, you know. So I'm like, the following Sunday, I'm like, hey Joey, let's go back. I kind of like that. Let's go back, you know. So I come back the following Sunday, and the same gentleman gets up and preaches again. I'm like, wow, just kind of blown away, and like, holy crap, you know. Like I said, the music is awesome, you know. I'm feeling it, you know. And I went to Joey. I said, man, that guy looks familiar. And he goes, well, I think he graduated the same year you did, Jim. I'm like, what's his name? He says, well, his name's Tim Rice. So I go running home then after church that day, and I whip out one of my yearbooks, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And I went to high school with Tim. And Tim liked to party like I did. And of course, you know, after talking to Tim the following Sunday, because I introduced myself to him, you know, he told me after high school he'd found the Lord and never looked back at using or drinking or anything else, you know, again, you know, and he's just been following that. He became a preacher and everything, and now he's just preacher. I mean, and man, Tim helped me so much in my walk in the beginning with God. You know, I mean, we had kind of this, after a while, we kind of had this thing, I'd come into the office and I'd be like, hey Tim, you got 5 minutes? And usually about an hour and a half later, or he would say, come back in about an hour. I'll have more time, because it was never 5 minutes with us, you know. And there was even I remember one Sunday coming here, and we used to do some skits and stuff. And I remember one day Jake and this other guy were up and doing this skit and everything, and I'm like deja vu, you know. And I'm like, and Tim come up to me afterwards. He goes, well, what did you think of that skit today? I'm like, it sounded really familiar, like the conversation me and you had about 3 months ago. Because I would come up with all these questions, and I'd be like, hey, Tim, what about this? And Tim would say, well, in the Bible it says this. And I'd say, well, what about this? He said, well, in the Bible it says this. You know, he says, there isn't a problem that you will go through that you can't find the answer for it in the Bible. And, you know, I continued to go to Narcotics Anonymous. I was coming here on a regular basis, man. And I mean, one of the things that really got me about this place was, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th time that I'd come here. And I'm walking in the door, and of course we got guys that open the ushers and stuff opening the door. And I don't remember who it was, I don't remember which one of the ushers it was. He opens up the door and he goes, hi Jim, how you doing? I'm like, he remembered my name. You know, so the one thing that you can do, especially to newcomers that come around here and stuff, remember their name.
Amen.
And introduce yourself to them and say hello, and you know, because I mean it was key for me staying here. Well then, I started doing service work in Narcotics Anonymous, and I was going down to area meetings in Duluth, and I met a gentleman named Dean, and me and him just like hit it off like right from the get-go. I had been clean for about 2 years when I met Dean, and man, we just clicked, and we became best friends. He is my best friend today, and after he was clean for about a year, he came up to me and says, hey, our church we're gonna start this thing called Celebrate Recovery. And it was on Tuesday nights in Duluth, and so I started going down there for Celebrate Recovery on a Tuesday night, you know. And you know, I remember one night, you know, this is how God has worked in my life. It was a Tuesday night, I'm down there, we're getting ready to go in to have a meal, and I get a phone call from my mom. And what a more perfect place to be than with other people in recovery at a Celebrate Recovery meeting, you know. I mean, it's just, it's a God thing, you know. I was right where I needed to be when I got the bad news, you know. And they helped me through that, and people in recovery helped me through that. And then I'd been doing that for about 6 or 8 months. Pastor Tim comes up to me and he said, hey Jim, he said, I gotta talk to you about something. We're thinking about doing this program, you know, and it has to do with, you know, recovery and addicts and, you know, and you know, people that have hurts, habit, and hang up. I'm thinking, He goes, yeah, it's called Celebrate Recovery. I said, I've been going to Celebrate Recovery in Duluth for about 6 or 8 months already. You know, he goes, really?
Amen.
You know, so Dean actually came up here, and at that time, Dean Weiland was running the CR, and you know, we kind of, you know, that's how I got involved with Celebrate Recovery. And, you know, my life has changed immensely, you know, and, you know, one of the things I like to talk about in my story is I held on to a lot of unforgiveness, you know, and I had the uncle that molested me as a child, and like I said, it went on from probably the time I was about 6 or 7 years old until I was 16 years, for over 10 years. And I always used to tell everybody, you know, my probation officer and my therapist, you know, you got to forgive him someday. I'm like, well, let me know when hell freezes over, because that's when it's going to happen. And I remember, because I did service work for NA, I got to know people in Duluth, like I said, Dean and some other people and stuff, and I love to go traveling for meetings, and of course I got involved with regional service work. As a matter of fact, I'm going there tomorrow at the state level. And so one Sunday there's a meeting in Superior at, I can't remember the name of the church, but there's a church by the college in Superior, and I'm sitting in the parking lot, and I called like 4 or 5 people. You know, it's like I can't get a hold of nobody. I'm like there like 3 hours early. I'm like, come on, somebody's answering the phone, and I'm sitting in my truck in the parking lot. I'm like, now what am I gonna do? A meeting doesn't start for 3 hours. And I hear this voice, Jim, you're gonna go forgive your uncle today. I'm like, nah, it can happen. Hell has not frozen over yet. A couple more phone calls, nobody's answering. It's like, no, Jim, you're gonna go forgive your uncle today. I'm like, I'm not listening. You know, no, it ain't gonna happen. I'm sitting there in my truck, and I'm like, he's like, Jim, go forgive your uncle. It wasn't an audible voice. It was just like something that was in my head saying, you're gonna go do this. And I'm like, no, I'm arguing with this voice in my head. I'm like, no, it's not gonna happen. And I gave in. I called my mom. I knew where the cemetery was, where he was buried in Superior, but I didn't know where in the cemetery. So I had to call my mom, and she knew why I was going there. And man, I remember driving there, and man, I'm starting to cry. I'm getting upset. I'm going through the gates of the cemetery. I'm in full-blown tears, crying, and I get out of the truck, and I'm looking around, and I found his grave right away, and I'm standing above his grave, and I'm like, I can't do it. No way, I can't do it. Can't do it. How you know, how am I going to do this? And I looked up. I looked to God. I said, God, please give me the strength to forgive this man. And you know, I looked back down. I can't explain the feeling. It shot me right in the head, went right through my toes. Yeah. I looked down. And I said, I forgive you. You know, I could never talk about this until I did that. Until I forgave him. Because every time somebody brought up about, you know, because usually a lot of times in the program, you see a lot of women that have talked about being sexually abused as a child, you know, and everything like that. And it was like people would bring that up, and I'd just be cringing in a meeting, you know. And now that I've forgiven him, I can talk about it. I'm free from it, you know. So it's hard sometimes, and I've had many men come up to me when I do share, you know, because I've had the opportunity to share at the state level, you know, different CRs, many Narcotics Anonymous meetings and stuff. I've been asked to share. People have sponsored. And you know, it's tough for men sometimes to share some of those things that happened to us like that when we were kids, because you know we're men, we can't cry, we can't do this and that. It's like, you know what, I'm a blubbering idiot. You know, I want, you know, and that was all because of this program at Narcotics Anonymous. I got my feelings back. I'll never forget that I had been clean for a couple of years. I'm starting to work the steps. I got a sponsor. I'm doing everything that I should be doing. I remember sitting at home one day and I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, it's one of these romantic comedy type deal things, and also was like, what's happening here? You know? And now I watch see a stupid commercial, I'm like, you know, and you know, it's okay though, man. And, you know, it's okay for men to cry.
Amen.
If you're holding it in, man, you can't hold that stuff in. You know, you can't hold on to unforgiveness because it'll keep you. It'll physically make you sick. You know, cause you a lot of stress. You know, so I can really talk about forgiving people. You know, I like to talk about how it works. You know, we say in Narcotics Anonymous, if you want what we have to offer and are willing to make an effort to get it, and you're willing to make certain changes, and you work the steps. You know, and I start off with meetings. You know, meeting makers make it.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't mean that if you keep on showing up at meeting that you're going to make it, because while you're at that meeting, find somebody that has what you want and ask that person to be your sponsor. You know, a sponsor is somebody that you can share maybe those intimate things that you know you can't share with everybody else in a group. Because I mean, there's certain things that you don't want to share with the whole group because not everybody that's at a meeting is healthy. And they might blow your anonymity right out of the water. They might go, hey, so-and-so said this at the meeting. You know, it's like, I've had it happen. I struggled with getting a sponsor for a long time because I had a gentleman that I thought I could share some stuff with, and he broke my anonymity, and you know, so anonymity is really important. So now you found that person. Work the steps of this program or NA with that sponsor, you know. Be of service to the program, you know, like Paul talked about, you know, even if we clean up at the end of the day, greeting somebody, supplying a meal, you know, and everything. Be of service. And you gotta believe in God. You know, I say it like at NA, I said, you know, because we call it higher power. But when I say that, I also say Jesus Christ is my higher power. I think he's the best. You know, that's who I believe in, you know. But you gotta have something you can believe in, because it's that time at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're, you know, because I think you see, I weighed 100, you know, between 190 and 205 pounds when I got clean, and I'm 280 pounds now. And I struggle with weight. I struggle with overeating. You know, early on in my recovery, I remember going to my sponsor and saying, you know, I'm making good money and I can't seem to pay my bills. And he goes, well, let me see your checkbook. You use a checkbook? He said, you should use a checkbook. I said, I use a checkbook. Well, he said, let me see your checkbook. And I looked, he handed him my checkbook, and he's looking at it, and he's like, he says, you either eat a whole lot of food from Walmart, or you have a shopping addiction. I ain't got a shopping addiction. He goes, I'm looking at your last 8 or 10 checks in here, and 6 of them are written to Walmart, and they're all over $100. You can't tell me that in the last month, you've eaten $600 worth of food. You got a really nice DVD collection, though, I'm telling you. You know, I mean, I did. I found out that, you know, because you can substitute one addiction for another. It's really easy to do, you know. I have to watch how I can't go into a casino. Because I had there was a time when I'm a millwright by trade, when work was really slow around 2009, and I had this gentleman from the church that had a production company, and I started working for him, and we would often do work in the casino. Well, I found myself, when we had time off, after we did the shows and everything, I'd go into the casino and play blackjack. Well, pretty soon, I didn't make no money that weekend. I spent it all at the blackjack table, so I don't go gambling anymore. And every once in a while, I like to play a few pull tabs, but I say, if I don't win after $15, I'm done. I set limits, you know. I still like to go out and have a few more minutes, but what I want to say is, you know, work the program. Find a sponsor. You know, believe in God. Trust in God. God will get you through it, you know. Get involved with a step study. Get a sponsor. Keep on coming back. It's worked for me. It's, you know, I say in Narcotics Anonymous, it's been around since 1956. millions and millions of addicts, and before that, even in AA, you know, it's been around for a long time, and millions of people have used this program. And if both AA and NA are basically based off the Beatitudes in the Bible. And so, if it's worked for all those people, whether they want to believe that God is, or Jesus Christ is part of their recovery, the program was based on the Bible.
Amen.
So, if anybody has any questions later, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, or anything, or talk to anybody, or pray with anybody. But that's, in a nutshell, that's how I did it.
Very good.